Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today, we are pleased to be joined by Caroline Whistler. She is the CEO of Third Sector, and they are doing incredible work, actually, really supporting the overall philanthropic landscape, across the United States. Caroline, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thanks for being here today.
Course. Thanks, Grayson, for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit more and share a little bit more about the work that your organization is doing? For myself and our audience.
For sure. So at Third Sector, our mission is to transform our nation's public system, so that's our state and local government, in a way that we can really advance improved and equitable outcomes for all. So that means we really believe that we can make our government work in a way that improves people's lives. Now, that's sort of a hot topic at the moment, but that is the work we do. We partner with governments again, at the state and local level to really make sure that they're using our taxpayer dollars, their policies, their services to be most responsive to those communities that they're serving. In order to do that, it means there's no special sauce here, but that government needs to be engaging everyone across race, background, circumstance, need to help define what are those outcomes that matter? What are the metrics that matter? How will we know? And how can government build those outcomes into their contracting, their funding, and their service provision across a county or state system?
I really appreciate that. And something that has come across as very important from our conversations and the research I've kind of done into the organizations, this idea of outcome based approach. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that philosophy drives kind of y'all's strategy and ideas at Third Sector and what that really looks like?
Yeah. So I know there's lots of terms of art out there. Many folks may have heard of performance based approaches, but we really take what we call an outcomes focused approach. And an outcomes focused approach is one that says, okay, our North Star is actually whether or not lives are improving in our
Hmm.
communities. A performance based approach could say, like, did you deliver this many activities, hours of tutoring? Did you achieve like a job placement? For us, the longer term goal is, are people's lives improving? Are they increasing in their wealth, in their income over time, for example? We really define our outcomes focused approach as any approach that a government agency or a civil servant could take that is truly, first and foremost, responsive to the voices, perspectives, power, and needs of community members that they
Hmm.
serve and that are directly impacted by the services. You think about like user-centered design, like this is it. This is like government, outcomes-focused government is taking that user-centered approach and helping then government not only to take those perspectives, but then say, okay, what does that mean for how we need to change how we fund? What policies and regulations are we making? How are we growing beyond? Oftentimes, government may receive money from the feds and spend it out and try to maintain compliance. How do we grow beyond clients and this idea of regulation to really more of a generative space that centers the outcomes that you want people to achieve, whether that's stable housing, increased incomes, and is thinking more dynamically and creatively about how you may need to fund differently, how you may need to partner differently with your communities in order to achieve those goals.
Thank you for that context. And I think it's so interesting, right? Because this nonprofit perspective, they're so ingrained with this idea of having the community really leading the work and the impact and what's going on, right? So I love, has that perspective been really beneficial as you work directly with the government of having this nonprofit perspective?
It's been interesting, right? So, a lot of our governments, I will say, when we started our work almost 15 years ago, this idea of talking with community was like, not sure we can do that. Is that legal? Is it possible? But now, truly, government understands stakeholder engagement is important. Thank you, human centered design. Thank you, UX designers who said, okay, let's talk to our customers. Even if they're not paying us for our services, we should figure out how we can be most responsive to them. So, government, I will say now, our government partners are really interested in how do we get the perspective from nonprofits, from our stakeholders, from our communities, regardless of race, background, or circumstance. And the question now is, how do you do that in a way that results in better outcomes for people? It's not just like hosting an event to say, okay, come and share your perspective. It's what do you do with that information? And what I think is so valuable about the nonprofit sector is, yeah, these folks have been responsive to communities for a whole lot of time. So, a lot of our work is how can government partner better with nonprofits in the community to understand what does the community need and to then be able to better fund and provide services that meet those needs and help achieve those shared goals.
Thank you for that answer. And something else that kind of came into my mind as you were kind of giving that, there's so many aspects in this wide breadth of the work that you do within the organization. What does it look like in terms of success whenever you are kind of working within this problem that y'all have kind of identified? And can you also maybe share a story, in terms of that kind of demonstrates what that looks like?
Yeah, I would love to do that. So, first, how we define success is measurable improvements in people's lives. So, on specific outcome goals, whether that's stable housing, whether that's increased income, and career growth over time, those are some of the examples. And I'd love to take y'all to LA County, where we did a partnership with the County Department of Youth Development. And our work there was in partnership with the Youth Justice Work Group because the Department of Youth Development was interested in developing a new contracting function. Government spends a lot of money every year. They were trying to think about how might we do this in the most responsive way. And we supported an implementation plan that allowed for the counties to actually recognize and enter into multi-year contracts with community-based organizations. These may be small nonprofits that were delivering responsive services that help equip youth and families to thrive and stay out of the justice system. So the
Right.
goal there was like, how do we divert away from the justice system? How do we prevent recidivism? How do we encourage thriving? And our project was to make sure that, in collaboration with local organizations, county staff, youth and advocates, that DYD was actually building contracting requests for proposals and funding proposals that were responsive to the actual needs of young people that they were trying to serve. The result and what success looked like is that we designed a contracting process that allowed for community-based organizations, not the ones that know how to respond to RFPs the best, if you will, or the largest organizations, but small community-based organizations that already were delivering impact in the community, that already were successful at diverting young people from involvement in the justice system or successfully reintegrating them and not having them recidivate, could get access to county funds that they would not have otherwise had access to. And it was really through our process helping support the engagement of young people with county staff to say, look, don't do a procurement for this. Like, I don't need tutoring services. I need behavioral health services. I need a place to live, right?
Right.
That allowed the county to open up its perspective and unlock the possibility of like what its funding could deliver in a community and who its partners could be, which in this case were new community-based partners.
If you don't mind, what about that story do you think is able to be kind of replicated across the country and in local communities? And also, really, how can nonprofits help foster that, within their kind of community as well?
So I mentioned that this project in LA was really about rewriting a contracting and funding process. One of government's greatest assets is our taxpayer dollars. And so, absolutely replicable to take this process of looking at and taking every contracting opportunity as an opportunity to engage community, make sure that you are going to fund something that has a chance of measurably improving lives, and also will build in those data and learning feedback loops to do it. So, absolutely think that this contracting approach from Los Angeles County could be replicated across other juvenile justice departments, across other contracting agencies. And I'll say one of the ways that we have found this to be really, helpful and replicable for nonprofits is that philanthropy can play a tremendous role in both seeing a best practice that has been done somewhere like LA County and bringing that and funding that process to be done in their local county or in their local state in coordination with those community-based organizations. So we've already seen actually some really great examples of this work from LA in Cuyahoga County, Cleveland, in Cook County, Illinois. There's other agencies that are already starting to say, hey, wait, we get this whole pot of money every year. And are our outcomes what we want them to be in terms of recidivism, in terms of folks thriving and employment and engagement? And if they're not, maybe we can think about spending those dollars differently. So I would say for nonprofits that are curious, you can look up on our website more about this Los Angeles project. You can educate philanthropists in your community. You can educate your county and leadership at the state level to see if they too might be interested in aligning their contracting and funding resources with improved outcomes for young people in their communities.
I absolutely love that. And, on the same topic of funding, the really accessing and reaching this government funding is something that's oftentimes, pretty intimidating and kind of a difficult process. And, it could feel like there's a lot of strings attached. What is some, advice that you would give to nonprofit leaders that are looking to, tap into it as a resource for their local community that they're really impacting and servicing, and how should they go about kind of.
Yeah, so it's absolutely there's a little bit of like jungle guide aspect to it. So if you think about, I'll use the justice example. Let's say you're a community-based organization working with young people, and your goal, your North Star goal, is to keep them engaged in their communities, employed, and not in prison. Doing a little bit of that mapping to see, wait, who cares in the public system about what we do? Who funds what we do? Well, certainly departments of correction care about keeping folks out of prison, your local county and Department of Social Services, your offices of reentry would care. And then once you identify who cares about the main outcomes that you work towards, then you can start to think about, okay, what would it look like to be in conversation with these folks? Let me pull up and see what their strategic plan and priorities are. And let me go and actually, this is the part where, even in remote world, like going and being in community and being able to both share, but also, learn about what these government leaders are trying to accomplish and share how you may be able to be a part of the solution. It all starts with looking in the same direction with the same North Star goals of what you want to achieve with the community. And, government does want to hear from their constituents. They want to hear from their residents. And a lot of times they don't know how, they don't have a lot of time. As a nonprofit, you can help make that easier and facilitate that process with your government partners. And that's how you can build trustworthy partnerships that last, that also will likely convert into funding possibilities. It's not going to be overnight. Like, don't come bang on their door when an RFP has already been released, right? But like, invest in building a relationship that helps them deliver responsive services to your community. And they will see that, if you share those same goals, you're part of that community and part of that way to deliver those resources.
Your answer was perfect, and it led so closely into kind of what I wanted to touch on next. So much of how the nonprofit sector operates is in alignment. It's another piece of the puzzle in terms of fitting in with what the government's kind of role is, and there's a collaborative aspect to the work and the role of nonprofits and the government. Can you share a little bit more in terms of how, for our audience, which is going to be primarily made up of nonprofits, how can they better align in terms of with the government around these outcomes and community impact within their communities?
Yeah. So I would say a big part is to try to make sure that the community is part of the goal setting process. So when government is setting their priorities, when there's a new administration or new legislation, how do you make sure that both the government agencies that are tasked with delivering justice related services, safety net services, et cetera, have the same North Star goals as those community members? And so really being able to understand that and meet with folks and understand, like, do we have shared goals? What would those measures look like? How can we, as sort of members of the nonprofit community, be advancing those goals from our side? How can you be engaged more in the process of that goal setting, in understanding the data that's going to be used that you can share, that can be shared with you, is a really important way to be sort of part of that conversation. And to give another example, just because I think that can be helpful, we worked with the Colorado Opportunity Scholarship Initiative, and we helped them think about their goal setting, which is they wanted folks to utilize the scholarships. And they were noticing that some folks were not utilizing scholarships and they weren't ultimately finishing their degree. So that was a challenge that they had in their data, which we were able to take to community based organizations and community members And ultimately surfaced for those students that the reason why folks weren't going back were, financial reasons, some career support reasons, like lots of stuff going on at home, childcare, transportation, a lot of all of the other things that get in the way of being able to go to school and finish your
Mm,
degree. Again, that led to a shared goal setting process where the Colorado Office Opportunity Scholarship Initiative said, okay, well, we want people to finish their degrees and to get a job. And in order to do that, what we're learning is we may need to release some funding for those wraparound services, for that childcare, transportation, the support that folks need to not only go back, but stay back and complete. And so that was something that, again, through engagement with nonprofits, there was a new RFP proposal that then allowed for folks to participate. There was an organization, 1 Million Degrees, that got that contract to provide wraparound services. And so that's another example of,
yeah.
again, engaging in the goal setting and aligning on what you want to achieve created opportunities, new funding opportunities, new partnership opportunities between government and the nonprofit sector.
Thank you for that story. And the through line for me that really kind of shines is this idea of really leaning into your values, right? In terms of the community that you support and allowing that to really drive the impact that you're having on them is kind of the through line that all of the success is kind of being built around.
Absolutely. Shared values and that like North Star of what are the outcomes? Like, what do you actually want to achieve? What does your community want to achieve for themselves? So, having that alignment on those outcome goals too.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you sharing all of this. And as we look to the end of the year and into the future, what does the future bring for third sector?
Well, it is no secret the challenging time that we have across this country and across our states with public funding and what that looks like. We are going to be publishing an insert in Stanford Social Innovation Review that details a bit more about what does outcomes focused government look like? Why do we need it in this moment? What can nonprofits, philanthropy, state and local leaders be doing to ensure that whether they have more money or less money, they can be centering their communities and delivering responsive services that get results throughout this time period. So keep an eye out for the third sector insert in the Stanford Social Innovation Review article that will publication that will come out in November, and that will flow into our end of year campaign to continue to grow this work and support communities that want to be getting better results with their governments, in partnership with their governments and nonprofits across the country.
Incredible. Caroline, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing more about the work and also these incredible stories and lessons that can really be pulled from them as well.
Thanks so much.